Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? I could technically put this over on the Midnight Ride channel, but I am going to talk about some books in addition to some TV. Yesterday I finished reading The Magos by Dan Abnett. This is the fourth and final book in the Eisenhorn series from the Warhammer universe. It's the first book not written from Eisenhorn's perspective, but the book itself, whether in audio or in print, also collects, at least 8 different short stories that Abnett has written about this character. If you get the paperback omnibus, which I also have, the books are all kind of collated into a chronological order. So you'll have the trilogy, but the book starts with a short story, and then in between the trilogy books and the Magos, the other ones are kind of parsed out so that you get a big shot of like the whole career of Eisenhorn. He's an inquisitor who thinks that he's on the path of the righteous, and the other inquisitors think that he's on the path of heresy, and that whole idea is explored throughout the series. But the Magos story is seen through the eyes of another character who kind of gives us an external perspective on him. I'm not really going to delve into the details of it here, just because I'd kind of have to recap the entire character and the series leading up to it. It would only be valuable if you've read the trilogy. Suffice it to say that I really enjoyed it, and I know that it'll also stand up to multiple rereads, and it does a lot of callbacks to those short stories. So, The Magos, good book, enjoyed it. I'm also going to do a callback to a book that I read. When did I read this? Probably spring of 2022. This was a book about Robert Smalls, who was a black man who helped to steal a Confederate naval vessel and sail it past a blockade and turn it over to the Union. And then he became a representative in Carolina. He had a very successful post-Civil War career. Incredible story all on its own. And so far as I know, I don't think it's been adapted to film or anything. I also don't think that it should at this point, just because, how many Civil War and post-slavery movies is Hollywood going to make? It's kind of like Holocaust movies at this point. It's can you give black people something else to do? You don't have to constantly remind them, hey, you were slaves once. They can just be people. It's okay, Hollywood. But I digress. One of my most powerful impressions from this book was the moment when Robert Smalls was pitching to the other blacks aboard the slave vessel, not the slave vessel, the Confederate vessel, the naval vessel. He's like, hey, when this happens, we're going to have a narrow window where we can seize the vessel and sail it past this blockade. But there's a risk. If we ever get caught, we're going to face massive consequences, definitely beatings, most likely death. And he didn't want to unilaterally make the decision and condemn everybody else on the boat to that fate, make the decision for them. But he did need their help. It's not like one dude can just sail one of these giant 1860s vessels. So he put it to the others aboard, and a bunch of them said, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And a few others were like, no, dude, I'm not going to risk it. He's like, all right, I understand, but in order to save you guys, I'm going to have to lock you up just in case this goes wrong. No hard feelings, I get it. Here's what we're up against. The act of instigating any kind of rebellion is extremely risky. You can't just walk around and say, hey, would you be open to overthrowing the government? Would you be open to going against the authority figures? Because, hey, if you find somebody who's definitely not willing to do that, they can turn you in and put you in some serious hot water. And so there's a massive, massive risk to navigate. Fantastic book. You should read that. You can check the description for the link. Why is this relevant? Well, the reason I wanted to do this video initially for the Midnight Ride channel is over there is where I talk about TV and movies. And tonight, the wife and I watched an episode of Andor. I've seen the show, she hasn't. Season 2 is starting up later this month, right after Daredevil ends. So for me, it'd be a good refresher to watch the original. There are 12 episodes of that show, but it's kind of divided into chunks of trilogies. Like 3 will happen on this planet, 3 will happen on another planet, 3 will happen elsewhere. The one universal complaint about Andor is that it is very slow paced. Some people like that, some people don't. Compared to the other productions, whether they're the shows or the movies from Star Wars, it's a slow burn. That said, for being a show about a throwaway character from a prequel that nobody asked for but pretty much everybody liked, this is the best Star Wars show that Disney has done. Mandalorian gave us some incredible, like really, really great moments. It also gave us some dud moments, and that's before we even get into season 3. It was uneven with its pacing, but that's because it was really episodic. This is a long story with a consistent through line through all 12 episodes, and it is done incredibly well. And it focuses on the most difficult aspect of a rebellion, namely the act of starting it up. And while Cassian Andor, played by Diego Luna, is the central figure in this, I would argue that the most critical figure is Luthen Rael, played by Stellan Skarsgård. He's the guy working behind the scenes to get the rebellion off the ground. And throughout this series, you see just how difficult that is. He's really got to manage his risks. And I was reminded, whenever I saw him handling that side of it, I was reminded of Robert Smalls handling the risk of starting this rebellion, of undertaking this act, knowing that if he failed, it would be horrendously bad for him. He's got to be very, very careful and selective with who he trusts. He's even got to lie to his allies. Sometimes he's got to play stupid. He's got to misdirect. Once you trust anybody, you are exposing yourself to risk. Starting a rebellion is a matter of mitigating those risks. When Star Wars came out in 1977, it was already established that there was an evil empire and there was a good rebellion on the other side. This series is about the very early days of that rebellion and the risks that people took to move materials, to manage assets, and to really get this thing going. You had to get money, you had to get materials, you had to get weapons, you had to know who to trust, you had to know who to maneuver inside the machine. And it also shows us the rare instance of figures inside the Empire who took their job seriously. These weren't just expendable stormtroopers with inept officers that rose through nepotism. There are figures who, they're like dogs with bones. They bite onto a lead and they don't let go, and it puts competent Imperial officials against competent rebellion actors. That is fantastic storytelling, and like showing stuff like that that's got backbone, that's got brain. Like that's what has made Andor stand a cut above the other series. But I think people have taken less interest in it because it's slow and it's a little bit more cerebral, and we like the spectacle of Star Wars. People want more spectacle with just enough cerebral stuff behind it to hold it together, and Andor kind of flips that ratio on its head. It's a lot more cerebral, and the spectacle comes a little bit less frequently. The episode that we watched tonight, I don't know the names of the episodes. It was the third episode. It's when Luthen Rael recruits Andor and they escape from that backwater junkyard planet. I want to really give a shout out to the set designers and the artists and stuff who figured out what these planets were going to look like, and they put key details in there, little bits of variety and visual cues and stuff that really made this feel like not just like an industrial world, but like a backwater, dirty industrial world. I've worked in kitchens, I've worked on construction sites, I've worked in all kinds of commercial outlets, and this planet that Andor was on, it was a perfect fusion of a junkyard and an oil refinery. It was squared off with different colored chemical reservoirs that were salted and crusted over, and there was a junkyard for derelict ships next to a motor pool. Um, the one piece of criticism I had for that episode was Luthen and Cassian meet in this pseudo factory where there's a bunch of really heavy equipment hanging from the ceiling by chains in a way that makes very, very little sense. I know that there are some places where like you would store equipment like that, but there's definitely no OSHA on this planet, because pretty much anywhere you walk, you're standing under something extremely heavy that is suspended by chains that we'll say that it's stored in a very tenuous fashion. Because once the bad guys pop in and they start shooting and chains get blown apart and things just start falling from the ceiling and ripping the whole building to pieces, like that was built for spectacle less than it was built for making sense. But in summary, great fiction can find its roots in great nonfiction and great history. And when you ask difficult questions like, how does a rebellion start? Well, history has shown us rebellions. How did it start? You can look at small acts like, hey, no pun intended, Robert Smalls trying to convince his fellow slaves to steal a Confederate naval vessel, sail it past a Union blockade, turn it over to the North, and defect. A complete risk to their mortal security. Anyway, just a thought for tonight. Drive safe. See you out there.